Okay, so last week I started off by telling you guys that sometimes people will hit me up asking me if I've heard what people have been saying about me on various podcasts. And I think kind of the subtext that comes with that and what people really want to find out is if I'm mad at people or if I have feelings about any of those things. And I think if you pay attention to my podcast, I've already answered that enough times. But to put it in a different way, the only person that I really have trouble forgiving is myself.
Everything bothers him.
He's unbothered.
He calls it unbothered, but that's what's cute because everything bothers him. He's bothered. I'm a botherina.
What's up, everybody? Thai Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Welcome to yet another episode of Unbothered by Thai Rivera. That's right, it's Unbothered by Thai Rivera. We're going to start off like we start off every episode, and that's by summoning the spirit of Snoop Bijou. For anybody that's looking for an update on my former producer, DJ Lindy, honk, 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 honk. DJ Lindy is loving life in California. He is loving it. He's taking pictures with all sorts of comedians. He's got a whole situation going on there. I believe he's now helping to produce a live comedy show. Who knows? Podcasting isn't for everybody. And I realized that I was a little bit of a whip cracker with him and Bijou. Well, technically, they were kind of whip crackers with me. But whatever it was, and it's over now. I hate when disgruntled employees try to come at you sideways, which I'm not saying Lindy has done that, because as far as I can tell, Lindy has pretty much forgotten about me, and I'm thankful for that, you know? He was creating a bit of a toxic work environment. There were times where he tried to start a mutiny, and Bijou, when she was here by herself, she never tried to start a mutiny, so I'm not really sure why Lyndon thought he would be able to come in and shake up the system, but it didn't work out anyway, so Lindy can stay where he's at as far as I'm concerned. Love you, Lindy, but not doing it with your toxic work environment. It's too small of an operation. The office is too small. And if you notice right now, it's a mess behind me. I made myself dinner tonight. I made myself tripas and beans. And if you guys aren't familiar with tripas, that is cow intestines. It's the Mexicans' answer to chitlins. Black people eat chitlins. That's the pork intestines. Mexicans eat the cow intestines, and boy are they good if you grew up eating them. If you're late to the game, it's probably not going to translate, but if you grew up eating them, you'll probably crave them for the rest of your life. I went to see Am I Racist the other night. I did a full video about it. If you guys get a chance, check that video out. It's the latest one I did. I expected it not to do that well because it's a variation or a deviation from what I usually do on my channel, but it is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't, and it really is a situation like that for me. Like, some of the videos that I put out are just to keep my creative juices flowing and keep myself interested. Everything I do, I like, but there have been times in the past when I've just been like, I should put a video out, and then I put together a video that really wasn't anything I was feeling, and those, I think the audience can tell on those that I'm really not feeling it. So those will usually get very low views. This one I really did feel, though. And this one, I hope it ends up getting more views. But I also know, because I'm a week late on that train, because it came out, I think, September 13th, something like that. And so I was a week late watching it. I watched it on the second weekend it was open. And that's just because time, I've been doing so much lately. And I really am a one-man operation. There is nobody helping me. Sometimes when I'm really pumping stuff out, which I've been doing good, but I just haven't been pumping out stuff to the degree that I've been able to at other points. And sometimes when I'm really pumping stuff out, people will joke with me and accuse me of having people work for me. Like one time, Butch Bradley, who's a comedian that I love and respect in Las Vegas, he has a residency. I think he's still at LA Comedy Club. I haven't talked to him in quite a while, but that's somebody I'll always be friends with. But one time Butch was telling me, he was like, I'm convinced you have a sweatshop full of Filipinos pumping out your videos and editing for you and doing the podcast. And because sometimes I really do work like that. Like sometimes I will not sleep for 30 hours at a time just because I'm working, and then I'll get ready to go to sleep and I'll be like, oh yeah, there's a couple more things that I should do. And it's been a minute since I've had one of those. And to tell you the truth, I don't really miss those. When they happen and they have to happen, I will always do it. I am a person that does definitely work well under pressure, and I do rise to the occasion when I have stuff to do. But I would prefer not be doing that right now. Right now, I really am enjoying exactly what I'm doing and the way that I'm doing it. There are times when I'm like, okay, you can up your production a little bit, but I'm being a very gentle and forgiving boss with myself because everything's getting done the way that it needs to. Just sometimes not sometimes, you're always going to feel, unless you're a true lazy slug, you're always going to feel like you could be doing more, should be doing more. Maybe I could have not gone to the gym and instead done this instead. But the gym is good for my mental health. And sometimes the gym is the only, like the attendant at the gym is the only other human being that I'm going to have an interaction with in the day. When I go to the grocery store, a lot of times I do self-checkout, so I don't have to talk to, well, not a lot of times, pretty much every time I do self-checkout. And so the only time I ever even have to deal with a clerk at the store is if something either doesn't ring up right or the weight is off on the machine and they have to come over and adjust it for me, because sometimes that happens. And, there are many things I do with my spare time. Stealing from HEB is not on the list. So it's never like a shady situation like that. It's just like, for some reason, the machine didn't register that I put the onion in the bag. So it's telling me to put the last item in the bag, even though the last item is in the bag, stupid. But even I have to tell you guys, I don't get upset with the little stuff that I used to maybe get upset with when I was younger. And when I say when I was younger, I mean even a couple months ago. And I really do feel like I'm maturing, as silly as that would sound at my age, 25. But at my age, as silly as it would sound, I really do feel like I'm maturing at a rapid rate. And I don't feel like I'm getting old or anything like that, even though I do like being my age. I have to tell you guys, when I was young, I could not wait to grow up. And then when I got to like my 20s, and people were still carding me, because I would be like late 20s, even early 30s, and people would still be carding me for cigarettes. Or when I went to the bar, I'd get ID'd every time that I went. And I'm not one of those people that's ever been sloppy. I guess maybe there have been moments, but I can't remember any significant amount of time where I like didn't have an ID. I mean, like maybe there was a point where I lost one and I had to wait for another one to come in the mail, but I don't even know that that's happened in my life. Like I've always had my stuff together as far as that goes, even before I started doing comedy. Because with comedy, you really do have to have a passport at all times, especially me, because I never know. I was supposed to go to Portugal, but that was right when Bijou was really at her worst. And so I ended up canceling that because either way, I knew I wasn't going to want to be out of the country. Like if Bijou was going to be healing, which was what I was hoping for, then I would have had to stay home and take care of her, because nobody's going to take care of my baby like I'm going to, and I wouldn't trust anybody, and not in a bad way. I have good people when I need them. That's what people, I think, a lot of times lose about me, is they'll say things like, nobody likes you anyway, and you lost all your friends. I wish nobody liked me sometimes. And I don't mean that as a slight at anybody that does like me. I love you guys. But, people have really liked me more than they should my entire life. Because I admit, at points, I was just a miserable, and not for me, you know what I mean? Like I was always quite pleased with myself. Maybe in my early 20s I went through, yeah, in my early 20s there was the adjustment when I was really beginning to understand what it was to be a gay man, which will depress anybody, really. When you realize the reality of being gay, you get kind of like, I don't know if it's like that for lesbians, but when it comes to gay men, when you realize the reality of being gay, sometimes it is kind of depressing. And you have to remember, I was living the best version of it because I was an S worker and a lot of guys were attracted to me. That's just a matter of fact in the way it was especially in my early 20s. Woo, it was kind of ridiculous. And that's why I ended up being an S worker, because I was like, all these guys like me, but when I like them back, they just break my heart. So maybe I should just take money from them and have it be that. But I was never like a scam artist type, like that kind. Even when I was really pumping at being an escort, no pun intended, take that however you want, but it's not like that. But I mean, like when I was really just, who's texting me right now? Oh, it's the gay besties. But yeah, when I was really, really working the most in S work, I really, I wasn't like scammy or anything like that. I was always doing things on the up and up because to me, I always looked at it like a business. Like that's what it was. And, I didn't want to have to be, because I knew the guys that were scammy or some of the guys that were scammy. It was rumored that I knew Andrew Cunanan. And I will tell you guys 100% honestly, statute of limitations would be up if I had done anything shady with Andrew Cunanan. If you guys aren't familiar, that was the guy that ended up unaliving Gianni Versace and all that. It was rumored that I was friends with him, but the person that started that rumor was an ex-roommate, ex-friend that wanted to get me investigated by the FBI just to make problems in my life. But like I said, I was doing everything on the up and up. So when that happened, I didn't even care about it. Like when that happened, like the Gianni Versace situation, I didn't care about that. I don't know, maybe I told you guys this story or not, but one time I bought Versace jeans with all fives because this guy had given me a ridiculous amount of money in all fives. And I don't know why he had all fives. I think he told me, but he had given me all fives. And so I went to the Versace store because I wanted Versace jeans, and they weren't as expensive as they are now. I want to say it was maybe like $300 or $400. And I'm not acting like I'm not trying to be that guy that's like, oh, it's $300-$400. I could wipe my ass. I'm not being like that at all. If you want to send me $300-$400, please do, but send it to my Venmo, Thai Rivera comedy. If you need the last 4 digits of my phone number, just so you know you're not sending it to a scam, hit me up, DM me on Instagram. This is probably a good time for me to also tell you, if you're watching this far, go ahead and drop me a super thanks if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, like I always say, don't worry about it. I told you, I just ate a dinner that would be good for a king if the king were a sloppy Mexican. I'm sorry, but it would be it would be fit for a king if the king were a sloppy Mexican that loved tripas. That's the way I did it tonight. It was so good. But anyway, what I was trying to get at is people have always liked me. And when I say miserable, I mean I was miserable to the outside world. Like for me, I was happy, but I would just be such a I've been honest with you guys about that too. There are points in my life where I have been what could be considered like a mean girl. And that's why sometimes when people try to come at me sideways online, sometimes I'll go at them so viciously and then they'll pretend to be the victim. And I was like, oh, I thought we were just going into that mode. Because I don't know if you know, but I live there. That's my old address that you're messaging me from right now. And I will never apologize to people for that. When it comes to people being like, he said this mean thing to me, I'm like, what did you say first? Let's talk about what actually made me say that to you, because I don't usually just snap on people out of nowhere at this particular point in my life. And so what I was trying to get at is people have always liked me a lot. And so when people try to make it seem like everybody hates you, it's like, nah, it's really not the case. That's why I am glad to be away from everybody. And when I'm ready to go back out, I will go back out, but I just don't feel like it. And I don't mean that at all in a depressed way, but I really did have to confirm 100% that I am the problem. This is why sometimes, if you're a person like me, you do want to be alone and away from everybody else. Because it's easy to try to find all these reasons and all these things for like why life isn't exactly where you want it to be or what you want it to be. So if you just take everybody else out of the equation, remove all other variables, you will see that you are more than likely the problem. And that's something I've always said throughout my entire life, but this is one of the first times I really decided to 100% prove it to myself that I am the problem. Like, you can say, for example, because one of the things I talked about quite a while back, if you guys remember, if you guys were tuned in back then. If you weren't, don't worry about it. Obviously, I'm going to catch you up right now. If you already know this, don't worry. I'm going to put a different spin on it so you don't get bored. But when I was hanging out the most at the creek, because the creek was my spot, and while I don't love Rebecca, the owner of the creek, I definitely do love that building, and I do love that property, and I did love that patio, and I do love that patio. I love a lot of the employees that were at the creek. I don't hold it against them that some of them can't talk to me, because there was, and I didn't tell you guys this, but I got a message not too long ago from somebody telling me that they had a falling out with the creek, because the creek really was asking people that knew me to show them loyalty by not supporting anything to do with me, which is shady, but at the same time, I get it. When you're weak, you need numbers. And so I personally reached out to nobody for anything. That's one thing nobody can tell you. Like I said, when I was trying to straighten everything out with the Rogan situation and the mothership, because it wasn't really the Rogan situation as much as I would say it was the mothership situation and Adam Egget. When I was trying to straighten everything out with that, I did hit up my friends. Like I told you guys, I hit up Brian Simpson, I hit up Tim Dillon, I hit up Tony Hinchcliffe, and I hit up maybe one other person that I can't think of right now. I think there was one other person. Wasn't really my friend, but she always pretended to be my friend. There were two people, and that would be Carrie. I can't remember her last name, and it's inconsequential. But Carrie from the mothership, she was the bar manager slash, I think she's just a manager in general at the mothership, but I don't remember 100%. I know she ran a lot of things there, but whatever. I don't pay attention to people's titles because that's never going to come into play for me, really. The only time I need to know what anybody does is if I need a guest to come in or I need something approved. Then I'll find out who I need to talk to, but I never find out what their titles are. And there are people that I've known in LA, Hollywood, for years that I still don't know what their official title is and what they do. I just know that they're the person that I would go to if I need XYZ done, like that kind of thing. But Carrie, I knew that she wasn't really my friend, but I was like, I'm going to test this. And I didn't do it in a way to play a game. I did it because I felt like this person is always pretending to be my friend. And so if I have a problem, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And so if I hit you up and say, hey, I need a go-between for this little thing right here because somebody's acting stupid right now and not doing the job the way that they're supposed to, then that's where you show me that you're my friend. And even if you can't make anything happen, you at least do everything that you can to possibly facilitate the most advantageous outcome for all parties involved. And when it came to my situation with the mothership, me being around that club, especially in the way that I was around that club, I know there's no way I wasn't a good influence on everything that was around me. Like, when it comes to the level of positivity that I can give a particular space at this point in my life, and even then, it really does outweigh any like annoying thing that somebody might have against me that really shouldn't matter anyway, because that's what you'll usually hear people say about me. It's never my, or it's very rarely my direct interactions with people that will bother them. Usually what it is people will be like, he's too outspoken about this particular thing, and it'll be like, that doesn't even have anything to do with you. Like one time I had a conversation like that with Tony Hinchcliffe, where he let me know something that he had noticed about me, and it was about one of my dealings on Instagram, and it was like, are you friends with that person? Do you know that? No, I just noticed that you were arguing with somebody on, and it's like, why does that matter to you? Like, how does that affect you? How does that affect the club? How does that affect absolutely anything at all? And it really shouldn't have. But I've often said with those people, like, the reason that they don't want the bar to get too high as far as comedy goes, because people would lie to you and say that Austin is the best comedy scene in the world. And Austin does have a lot of great characteristics to it. But when it comes to what's considered the top of Austin, when you consider Tony Hinchcliffe and Joe Rogan are at the top, that is not a high bar for stand-up comedy. And sometimes people will be like, well, you're not funny. I would smoke either of them, and they know it. When it comes to actual stand-up, I have nothing to worry about when it comes to those two buffoons. And I don't mind saying that. And you notice nobody ever really disputes that knows stand-up comedy, especially stand-up comedy on the Austin scene. So that's why I say one of the tricks with the Austin comedy scene is that they will allow the bar to only get so high, because otherwise Joe Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe won't be able to get over that bar. Joe Rogan will always be able to get under the bar. Short joke, I admit it, but they won't always be able to get over. And so maybe one day I'll make a full video, but I'll make it in one of the formats that gets me actual views. Like, that's the way I'll do that if I decide to do it. But right now isn't the time. I do everything pretty much by feel. But what I'm trying to get at with all that situation is that when I was at the Creek the most, it really was, people didn't always understand that sometimes, even though you'll see me in a public place, that doesn't mean that I want a lot of people around me. And I'm not going to do that stuff most of the time. Like, once in a while, I'll ask for privacy. But for the most part, I'll let people be around me when they want to be around me. And I would a lot of times find a space all by myself away from everybody. And then before long, there would be a crowd around me. And this is verifiable through Leonardo or anybody that went to the Creek at that time. Like, there were a lot of times where I'd just be sitting completely by myself just because I wanted to enjoy the night air. Because one thing I will tell you that I do love about the city of Austin, or maybe it's just this area of Texas, you could say, because it's more to do with the weather than the actual city. But I really do love nights here. Not the real hot ones, but even those can be all right, because you got to remember there's a little bit of humidity, which can be miserable during the day. Well, sometimes a lot of humidity, which can be miserable during the day. But usually by night, that turns into something at least somewhat cool, which I'm from Arizona, and then I spent a lot of time living in Las Vegas, which both are very similar in climate and humidity. And so when you're used to the climate of Arizona and Las Vegas, or Phoenix and Las Vegas respectively, you do get used to that dry heat. Well, you never really get used to the dry heat. People ask me all the time, how did you live in that heat? And I'm like, you just go from one AC to the other. That's the way you get through that heat. Like, there is no person I know that lives, because like, if you know people that live in, like, say Michigan or somewhere Midwest that's known for cold, you'll see them out in shorts sometimes when it's super cold, and they're like, I like the cold, my body is really built for this or whatever. When it comes to extreme heat, I have lived in extreme heat for most of my life, And I have never met somebody that's like, oh no, I love it when it's 120. I love when it gets to 113 and above. That's really where we find my sweet spot. I don't know anybody that feels that way. The only thing that I really love about that time of year when it gets that hot, because that's usually, I tell people not to visit Arizona from about late June. I would say stay out of Arizona until Halloween, just to be safe, because usually on Halloween I think about hoodies and stuff. Maybe you could go a week earlier and be all right, but I always think about Halloween as like, yeah, usually on Halloween you do need to wear a hoodie, but it's dry heat. And so when it's hot like that in the summer, even at night it sucks. Even at night, the only thing that's good about it is if you like swimming. Like, I personally like really warm water, like bath water, which I'll swim in cooler water than that for sure. And if it's the ocean, I'll definitely do it, because a friend of mine, when I went to Australia, the one and only time that I've been to Australia, took me to Bondi Beach, and she said my grandmother used to say that you should never turn down a chance for a swim in the ocean. And that's really stuck with me. So when I do have a chance to swim in the ocean, unless it's super, super cold, I'm not going to turn into a polar bear over it. But I will take a dip in the ocean. But as far as the water that I like swimming in, when it comes to a swimming pool, I love when it's been that hot, like literally 113 and above. And then it's like nighttime or evening. You don't want to do it during the day because you will come out crispy. When I was younger, we used to get like dark because my skin tans super well. But when I was younger, we would spend so much time swimming. And one of my mom's favorite sayings was to go drown yourself when she wanted us to go busy ourselves. It was her equivalent of playing traffic. And she would say, Mijo, go drown yourself. And that meant go take a dip, go do something with yourself, get out of my face. It's summer. I'm tired of seeing you guys all day, which, I will mention that my mom, even though I talk about her like that, which is just the truth, my mom was an MVP housewife and mother. Like, there has never been, well, I'm sure there were some of your mothers, I'm sure were great too. Wink, wink, just playing. But no, my mother really was. I'll talk about her on a full episode one time where I really give the breakdown on my mom. But she really was like a true housewife and mother, and very much on top of it. But any human being needs time to themselves. And we were sometimes so on it with her where, we'd be chatting and we'd be in the house and like regular kid stuff that now I don't hear a lot of people talking about. But when I was younger, no in and outs was a rule at pretty much every house that you went to. So that wasn't even, like considered even mildly negative behavior from a parent, or it wasn't ever frowned upon where it was like, hey, don't be coming in and out. You're letting out the air. And, that meant you're letting out the cool air from the AC. But yeah, you're letting out the air, no in and out. If you're going to go outside and play, go outside and play. If you're going to come inside, well, my mom sometimes would just decide for us, you're going to go outside and play. And so we would go outside and play, and we'd go swimming, and it would get so dark because we'd be in the Arizona sun. And then there was a point where my mom put a limit on us, and she was like, okay, you guys, because the news said, not to be out between noon and 3, or those were the hottest when the sun is at its peak. And so we weren't allowed to be out between noon and 3 p.m. unless we were under the patio, or under the, yeah, that's a patio. And so, but what I was getting at is when I would go to the creek at night like that, there would be people around me a lot of times, and sometimes I'd get caught up in the moment and be hanging out with everybody, because it's not like I hated it. Just sometimes I really did feel like I would rather be alone. One time Leonardo got a good laugh because, I'll be bitchy at any moment sometimes, and I really do have fun with that part of myself when I decide to let it play, and I decide to really just let it be what it is, because I do believe in that, and I do think that's good for anybody, to every once in a while just be 100% you, and don't worry about anybody's feelings. And that doesn't mean you have to hurt feelings, but just sometimes it's like, yeah, this is just going to come out the way that it comes out. Like one time there was this guy that got a little bit sassy with me, and he's the one that chose to come sit with us. And I didn't even particularly like this guy. I don't hate him, but he's just one of those people that always gets too drunk, and then he expects everybody to put up with his frat boy behavior. And I hate that. I've always hated that when somebody's really just ruining the vibe because they're drunk and they want to, hey, why aren't you saying hi to me? Come give me a hug. And it's like, shut up. Just be a regular human being. I know you're drunk, but I'm not. I haven't been drinking. I'm not in that headspace at all. I don't want to have to humor you. Maybe I don't want to hug you today. Maybe I'm not thinking about hugging your fat, sweaty ass. And that's what it was. And sometimes people will say that I'm mean for calling people fat, but it is what it is. I'm not going to pretend that every once in a while I don't use the word fat. Maybe that's the F word for some people, but for me, there's two other F words. One of them, well, both of them I love technically. But yeah, so one time I told that guy, because he tried to get sassy with me, and I was like, yeah, I can move or you can move. But if I move, don't follow me to where I go next. I don't need the company. I haven't been lonely since the 90s. And that's kind of the way it is for me. I don't get that lonely. I will miss particular people, and I'll never lie about that. Like sometimes I do miss particular people, but I'm never lonely just for the sake of being lonely. Like where it's like, oh, just anyone would do. If I could just have some company, I would feel so. No, what are you talking about? Just company in general? Just anybody? I couldn't imagine. Sometimes, though, I do notice that I'll meet people out of nowhere and just like them right away. And it'll be one of those where, like, you know, I'm hanging out in public and then a person just comes over and starts talking, and then we just hit it off, and in a friend way, not like anything else. Sometimes that happens too, but like for the most part, I'm talking about like people coming up in a friend way. I really am shying away from any kind of intimacy right now when it comes to the physical end and stuff like that. I haven't been on Grindr. I haven't been cruising anywhere or going any place to hook up with people or talking to any of the people that I've hooked up with in the past. I haven't been doing any of that. I kind of want to just shut that part of myself. Not I kind of want to. I kind of have just shut that part of myself off more recently because like I said, I really do just want to work on things that I need to work on. And when I say that I really am the problem, I don't mean that in a negative way at all, or I'm not down on myself. But I've said forever that you really are your own problem, and almost everything that happens to you that's negative is really you. And sometimes people get mad at me about that. Sometimes people will call it victim blaming. I don't mean it that way at all. Like, there are things that happen in our lives that are definitely not our fault. And I don't mean like, you know, an R word situation. If somebody R worded you or something happened to you in your childhood that shouldn't have happened to you or that kind of thing. But I do mean like, you know, when say, you know, like sometimes you have these people that are constantly like, you know, saying that things have gone bad for them in the financial sense, and you're like, okay, well, are you working everything to its potential as far as many hours as you can do and being as available as you possibly can? Because I have a few friends like that, and I stay pretty non-judgmental, but I will notice, but they also know not to come to me with it, because I will ask them the hard questions, you know? Like, I had a friend that had complained to me about being unemployed at a point, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, we were talking. And then I asked them a couple of questions, and over the course of their answers to those questions, I realized that they really weren't making themselves as available as they could if they wanted actual employment or for that situation to really change. It was kind of a, I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm talking from their perspective, I'm gonna tell you why life isn't working out for me, but I'm not gonna take accountability for the fact that I'm not putting myself out there enough, and I am trying to be particularly choosy. And if your life can work out that way and you can make everything happen, I'm 100% fine with that. I respect it, but I also shouldn't be hearing about it. And so I, am very clear with people, the people that I still continue to talk to, when I continue to talk to people, that there are boundaries in place here. Like I'm not a good one, and this is something that gets me in line or in trouble online sometimes, is when people online will be talking about certain things, and in my head I think there's a solution to this, and this will be like sometimes, on social justice issues, where it'll be like the relationship between trans women and bio women, or women, as many of us would call them, just women. So it'll be like that kind of situation, like trans activists. It's some of the most trouble that I've ever got in as far as online, with trans people being mad at me. It was because at that time I hadn't realized, and that's why I always make it clear on my videos that do feature trans characters or LGBT people. I'm always clear about the fact that these are activists pushing this kinds of stuff. This isn't regular people, because I made that mistake when because when trans first became popular, and I do mean popular, where I think it was around 2015, 2014, right around there, that, everybody started in some way, or a lot of people started in some way claiming to be trans, and there were trans comedians coming out, and I naturally kind of gravitated towards them, or let them gravitate towards me, because they knew that there was safety in hanging out with me, and everybody's always been cool with me regardless of what people tell you. LA especially, people were super cool with me. And so there were a few of the trans comics that originally had kind of ingratiated themselves to me and been like, would make it very clear that they were friends with me, so that people could see that they were friends with me. And I never minded that, because I knew why they were doing that. They were doing that so they wouldn't get messed with, because people were treating them like outcasts. People were being disrespectful to them. People were new to trans, and there were people that would refer to them as it, or that kind of stuff. And I was because I've had trans friends for so long, that I always felt like I could be kind of a safe space for them. Little did I know that one day they were going to turn around and backstab me, but who cares? Because really, if you don't let people get that close to you, they don't stab your back technically. It was just one of those things where it was like, hey, I was actually nice to you. How did it turn into this situation where now you're selling me out online, trying to get me canceled, fired from gigs, like that kind of stuff. And I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. And these were trans comics that I helped out. It turned out that at a point they realized that it was more beneficial monetarily to go the activist route. And so that meant turning on a person like me, because I'm not a politically correct person. Because even though I'll be nice to you and I will be a safe space to you, which I would maintain is more important than whatever the bullshit you're talking about online is. Because if I'm real life somebody that'll have your back and make sure people don't bully you or mess with you or get physical with you or that kind of stuff, and then you have your little online life, I think you should understand that the real value comes from the person that will actually protect your real life safety, not the person that'll protect your feelings online. But that's on you, however you decide to do it. It's a choose your own adventure with me, because either way, I'm going to be the same me. And if you are the one coming to me for protection, then what do I need you for? And so, because my feelings don't get hurt online. Sometimes people will try to say the worst things to me online, and I'm like, no, who cares? Which was one thing that I really have started to work on about myself, is because I will be like verbally, which of course translates to, text or typing, on comments and stuff like that, reactive with people. And a lot of that does stem from that I do every once in a while like to flex that and have fun, because I don't know if you guys have ever seen me really get into it with people online when it's like a back and forth, but I am really good at it. And the wording that I pick is always, I have a good way of figuring out, like I said, what it is about people that bothers them, and I will just push on that. I will push on that until, you'll be hurting for a couple weeks if you catch me on the right day. I know that's why some people still hate me to this day for arguments that we had back in 2015, 2014. But what I was saying about the trans people, like I'm getting better about learning that some people don't want an actual solution. They just want to keep complaining. And I learned that because originally, when it came to these trans people that hadn't realized were going the activist route, because before then there wasn't really trans activists like that. Like, yeah, there were activists doing the actual work for years and years and years, and doing advocacy for actual transsexual people and trying to help them get their meds, or in some cases get care for things like HIV, or get funding that they needed, or rather than saying funding, I think you would say like general relief, which would be like, a check so that they can have some money or whatever, which would be like the equivalent of welfare. But for people that have, a mental problem, which gender dysphoria, I don't know where that fits in on the DSM now, and if people can still get money for that. But when I was younger, that was definitely a thing. So there have been the activists that have been doing that kind of advocacy. But as far as it being the business and kind of the clout play that it is nowadays, it hasn't always been like that. And so that was new. And so when they went that way, I hadn't realized that that's what they were doing. And so I would try to offer them honest solutions that I thought would be helpful. Like, there was a point where one comedian that I don't even know if they do comedy anymore, but she was a trans woman, and she had one time mentioned like whatever bills were coming up, and that's one of the first bathroom bills, which I believe was in North Carolina. Google it. But yeah, which that one, people made such a big deal of that one, when really it was just saying, hey, put some effort into yourself. And I was gonna do like a joke about it, a story about it. I did jokes about it back then, but I do them at open mics or whatever, because I never really fleshed it out all the way, because you have to set up what the law is and what they're saying, because so many people are and I never pretend that I'm super smart, but at the same time, I'm smarter than a lot of these dummies, because a lot of these dummies are so anxious to be in victim mode that they don't bother reading anything. And when I read about that bathroom bill, the original one in North Carolina, or the first one that became noteworthy in the news, it really was just saying, make them wonder. And that was like basically what it translated to, because I read it, and even though I'm ninth grade educated, which I'm kind of proud of, but one day we'll really get into like what it was like for me as far as school went and education and all that stuff. I'm probably not as dumb as I make myself sound, but I have fun being dumb, and so let's not ruin the facade. But I actually did read that bill because everybody was so up in arms about it, and everybody was acting like this is possibly going to change the way that trans people have to move through the world in this country. And that, because when I tell you guys about my life, 100% legit, like, trans friends for my entire adult life. So where these people were just like catching on the train, even the ones that were actually trans themselves, they were just getting kind of acclimated in that world. And I had been firmly ensconced in it at that point for what, 20 years? And so this wasn't new for me. It wasn't novel. And there was definitely a real concern. So I was like, let me look into this actual bill. And I read it, and it really was just saying, put some effort in yourself. Like, if you don't look like it was basically safeguarding against what's happening now, where it's like a man with a mustache, and no exaggeration, a man with a mustache will come into a woman's locker room or demand access to a woman's bathroom, and there's really nothing anybody can say about it because they identify as. And that law in North Carolina, maybe they were ahead of their time, or maybe it was just already starting to happen there, or somebody had tried it, or some bodies had tried it. But one way or another, the wording was basically just saying, if you're not at least trying, don't mess around. This isn't for you. And so, but some people were worried about it, and I was still in a young enough state mentally, that I wanted to help these people that were panicked, even if I thought they didn't have a reason to be panicked, maybe calm their nerves a little bit. And so told this one comedian that had posted about it online, that was one of the ones that I had always been super nice to and super supportive of. I was like, maybe you should organize with other trans people from across the country, because I knew they did have a big network as far as trans people at that time, because they were doing, like I said, kind of more activist comedy, and it was before they had turned on me. And well, we had gotten into it already, because they had gotten stupid with me back before I knew that they were transitioning, when I just thought that they were, something different, maybe working an androgynous look, because that's before we really talked about non-binary. So it would have been like androgyny. And then they identified as a cross-dresser, a transvestite. Not me being disparaging, that's literally what they identified as. And so there was a point where I hadn't realized that they had now transitioned and were identifying as a trans woman and transsexual. And I said something that was not meant to be insulting to them. I referred to them as he or him in a context when we were chatting online, when we were going back and forth on Facebook. And it wasn't a hostile thing. Like, I was ribbing them about like something it was a post they had put up. And so I didn't feel at all like I was, being hostile towards them, or I didn't feel like it was an adversarial position I was taking or anything like that. But then they called me stupid, and that, of course, got on my nerves. And then they said something about them being a woman, and how did I not know? And I just responded with try harder. And so and so that hurt their feelings, but how does that affect me? I mean, like, if you're supposed to be a woman and I still have no idea that you're supposed to be a woman, that's more on you than it is on me. You need to work on what you need to work on to get that point across, because I can't pick up what you're not putting down. And so but for me, like I said, it was no problem. I just read them real quick, and then I was about my business. Apparently they had feelings about it, but I had told them, to maybe scatter throughout their network little messages of people, like, maybe outreach and make sure that more and more people actually know a trans person one-on-one, which may sound silly to people, but that's really what we did as gay men. That's a lot of how gay rights happen. Well, the lesbians were very helpful in that, because lesbians were really doing their best as far as being kind of the straight-laced, no pun intended, version of LGBT, the more respectable version of LGBT. Also, in a lot of cases, the sexier side of LGBT. Because if you remember, and this was before it was LGBT even, this was when it was the gay community. But if you remember the way that a lot of the rollout went for the gay community, was the lesbians were the canaries in the coal mine. They came out, they were sexy, L-word type stuff, which, yeah, that was all stereotypical, but it really did help us get a foot in the door. And then the gay men, we had our part, because we were doing hair, we were planning weddings, we were best friends in a lot of cases, the gay bestie. The girls would come out to the club with us. They knew they were going to be safe. They knew that they were going to have a good time. They knew that guys that they didn't want to hit on them weren't going to hit on them, because we're in gay bars. And so, like, we did a lot as far as outreach from the gay community between the gays and the lesbians, to charm everybody into wanting to help us out, into wanting to see us happy. Because how can you love Thai and say Thai is your gay bestie and acknowledge that I've helped you through breakups, and I've helped you through pregnancy, and I've helped you through, and literally this is the role that a lot of us played as far as the gay and lesbian friends. We were really reliable friends, and that is very genuine a lot of times when it comes from gay and lesbian people, because a lot of us in different aspects, especially back in the day, we got abandoned by so many people that it made us loyal to the people that were loyal to us. And that's why some of us have lifelong female or even male straight friends, it's because we know what it's like to have people abandon you. Like when I came out of the closet, my parents did not completely abandon me, but there were some rough years there, and there were some years that I definitely did, for the most part, stay away from them, and they stayed away from me because they didn't understand me and I didn't understand them not understanding me. As silly as that may sound, that's the best way I could put it, because I couldn't see why they just couldn't accept me. And they couldn't understand that I am actually gay. To this day, they think it's a phase, and I let them have hope. At this point, I'm not arguing with them about that, or I don't say anything about it. I don't know if my dad does, but I know my mom definitely does sometimes mention, and it's been a minute, but she does sometimes mention that she thinks it's a phase, or she really doesn't think I'm like that, and one day I'll settle down or whatever. She said that a couple of years back, but it didn't make me feel bad. It didn't make me feel any kind of way, and it definitely didn't make me feel invalidated, because while I love my parents very much, I mean it when I say that I'm not looking to any other person for validation. I find that inside of me. My parents do love me and support me, and that's all I need them for. Like, I don't need them to, understand every single thing I go through. I know that if anything is seriously goes wrong, like I said, when I was going through my thing with Bijou, I literally called them to cry about that. Like, they were my safe haven, and 100%. And my niece, too. But like those were really, it was those three people for the most part that I just really would unload on, and I would ration it out between the three of them. Sometimes it'd be my dad I'd talk to, sometimes it'd be my mom, sometimes it'd be my niece. But I would, that's the way I would do it. But so like that's how much our relationship has healed. But there were years in the beginning when I first came out that I felt like they had abandoned me. And that also coincides with when I was partying too. So I wasn't really giving them the most to be proud of anyway, or the most to really latch on to. And you can say those things fed each other, but whatever happened, it happened. And so what I'm saying is, that as far as gay and lesbian went, is we really did charm people into wanting to see us happy, into wanting to see us have our rights, and also by letting people in and letting people see the way that our relationships in some cases worked, and that we were just as normal as they were, or in some cases just as dysfunctional as they were, because there's straight people that have had problems with their families too. There's straight people that don't get 100% acceptance from, the life choices that they made from society or whatever. And that was the other thing, there were friends that definitely did become off limits once you came out as gay. And so that made us be loyal and very good friends, not only loyal, but, trustworthy, just everything that you would want. Some of us, not all of us, but there was enough of us that did it nationwide, and it wasn't at all a planned attack, but that, that really did put us over. And so I suggested that this person go ahead and organize that within the trans community, because I really feel like that when it comes to actual transsexual people. When it comes to the people that are doing it as a fetish, which is commonly referred to as autogynephilia, or the people that are just identifying as trans because they're non-binary and they want to feel special, not those people. Those people are not at all solution based and are not at all trying to figure out what they can do to help in society or be productive in society. They're more trying to be like the stick in the spokes. That's what those people are trying to do. I don't know why you would want to live that way. I would imagine it's unhappy family life and unresolved issues. But whatever. So I suggested that because I know how effective that was for the gays and lesbians. And I said it in the nicest way possible. I really worded a nice, because I was sincere. And it was like, if you're telling me that this is a dire situation for trans people and you're so worried about it, here's something that could be an actual solution. Here's something that could possibly help your cause out if you're sincere in wanting help. And literally what they sent back was... And I never forget it, like I don't remember it verbatim, but I do remember what it said, I mean, like the gist of it, and almost verbatim, but they told me, thank you, Ty. I'll just go ahead and put that in the file I have that's marked shit I don't need. And so, I don't remember what all I told them, but I know that I closed it with, oh, I did tell them that maybe if they were actually worried about helping out the trans community, they would at least take my words and understand that I came from a good place, and that I think that they were more interested in monetizing their transition than actually helping any type of cause, and not to forget that they can still put on makeup while they're sitting on a high horse. And then they chose to block me, which I was only going to give them more, so they were right to block me. I'm not going to say they were wrong, because I was ready to go on what I call a run with them. I was gonna there's one, I don't even know if she's still out as trans or if she's, a comedian anymore. But she was the biggest mooch in the Hollywood scene. And her name was Olivia Hader. I don't mind saying her name because she was such a miserable, miserable person. And I hope that if she's still around, she's a happier person. There was a point where she put up a GoFundMe to get an RV that she wanted. And the LA comedy scene raised, and I'm not even joking, I think it was $10,000 that they raised from her, which $10,000 is $10,000. That's a lot of money, but they raised it for her because she needed this RV. She was going to be homeless, and somebody was selling an RV. It was an owner of one of the clubs. I think it was called Echoes Under Sunset was what it was called, which there was a comedian by the name of Jeff Karasolis that used to call it Egos Over Butt Sex. But it was Echoes Under Sunset. And the owner had an RV that he was selling. So they raised the money. They got her the RV, or she got the RV. It turned out she didn't do any or have an expert test it or get it checked out in any way. It turned out having huge electrical problems, and then she ended up having to ditch the RV, I believe was the way that it went. And so they had raised $10,000 for her basically to throw it away. And then she was trying to raise money shortly after to get her bottom surgery. But there was a couple of times where she came for me in a particular way, and boy, did I let her have it. Like, the whole LA comedy scene at that time really did love those threads, because I really went for her. Because these people don't understand. Like, I'm legit what you pretend to be. Like, when it comes to these people, like, I might as well just shave my face, get a wig, and be trans myself, because I'm more of a trans woman than you are, because the real way that being a trans woman works is when somebody comes for you, you hit them in a way they're not ready for. You give them the 1 2 1 2, girl. You read them is what you do. And I love reading. It's one of my favorite things. Like, because my friends used to do it with me, and it was like sparring, because we're all friends, and it would be two of my trans friends. I wish I could say their name. I wish, because I do love them. I swear one day I'm going to immortalize them in jokes when I have enough money to make it so if somebody canceled them, I can support them for a year. That's what I'm going to do, is I am going to do that, because I feel like they've played such a role in my life that they deserve acknowledgement. But when it comes to that, that's one of the things I like the most, especially one of them in particular. We used to read each other in a way that a lot of people weren't ready for. And then between them, because they were both trans women, the way that they would read each other, I'd watch it like a tennis match. I'd just be loving watching them go back and forth and just say the most horrendous things to each other. And it really was just the best for me. And all the girls I knew, well, the girls I actively hung out with when it came to trans women were passable and pretty. or as passable as you're gonna get, because there will always be tells. There will always be certain ways that you're like, okay, if you're really attuned and you're really paying attention, you will notice usually something. But the girls I knew were as passable as you can get. And one time, one of them told, and this was such a childish and simple put down, but it just made me laugh so hard, and it's really stuck with me. Is one time one of my friends told another one of my friends that she didn't look like a woman. She's like, yeah, whatever, bitch, you don't look like a woman. And the other one was like, your mama doesn't look like a woman. It made me laugh so hard because I knew her mother, and her mother did look like a woman, but at the same time, you could understand how somebody could say that and have it be like where you'd side eye her mother, sort of like, maybe. But yeah, and so, but and that was just like a real, like, just funny, quick, quippy one. But we would really read each other because, they'd be on the track, which, if you don't know what the track is, that's usually what the girls will work when they're out there, that kind of way. And so they like, and in Vegas it's called the Fruit Loop. That's the same place that the trans girls used to go outside and work. And so I'd be at the club, which that's the club is in the Fruit Loop as well. So all I had to do was walk out to the front of the club and see where the girls were standing, because they'd stand around and read. And one of my friends that's a well-known trans woman that I had a falling out with years and years ago because she was trying to be abusive with my kindness, and that's 100% the best way I could describe it. She was so disrespectful in so many ways, and she didn't have a car, and I would give her rides everywhere, and I did look to her as an elder because, like, at that time I was super young, and she was like late 40s, early 50s. Really, I think early to mid 50s, if I'm being 100% on looking back what it was. She's black, and she had gotten to the point where it was starting to crack, so that lets you know usually that's older. And so she already like looked older. So some of the other girls called her old lady face, but they did, and they'd call her it like it was her name. They'd be like, have you seen old lady face today? But yeah, so she would refer to it as cutting and serving and dishing. You know what I mean? She'd be like, the girls were outside in front of Gypsies. They were cutting and serving and dishing, and then that's what they'd be doing. You know what I mean? Because cutting, you're talking shit to each other. Serving, being beautiful. Dishing, giving up the gossip. And so they were cutting and serving and dishing. And but yeah, and so I'd go out there and hang out with them, and sometimes, like I said, I'd just stand back and watch them go between each other, and then sometimes I'd join in. Every once in a while somebody would engage me, and it made it so the boys weren't ready for it, like the gay boys. Every once in a while a gay boy would try to come for me, and that'll still happen sometimes. That's what happens online. That's literally what I'm saying, is that a lot of people just aren't ready for me because I do come at things a different way, because that's the world I come from, or that's the world that I was raised in gay life. And also when I was super young, that was the way that I defended myself, because there were points in my life where people did try to come for me all the time because I had effeminate mannerisms, or I didn't behave like the other boys, or I wasn't interested in the same things as the other boys were. And when I was young and in junior high, and there were a lot of girls that did like me, and guys wouldn't understand that I wasn't thinking that way. And it was before I was coming out. It was when I was literally in junior high and still in my town, and not in, once I moved to Phoenix, that's when my world opened up. Like, I've talked about that before. Like, it wasn't until I moved to Phoenix that I even realized that being just gay was an option. In my head, I thought I was meant to be trans, or I was meant to be a girl, and so I was going to need a sex change. And I've talked about that on videos before, and I really did think that in my head. That's 100% the way that I thought, and I didn't dare voice that to anybody ever when I was young, because it wasn't the world we live in now, especially growing up where I grew up in Arizona. I wasn't living in Phoenix. And so and there was a point where I started dating girls And that was just to fit in and stuff like that. And I had pretty girlfriends and stuff like that, but like all the pretty girls, because I was gay, even though they didn't know I was gay, or they didn't know, none of that stuff, but just you sense, or when somebody's non-threatening, that's what I should say. And so the girls were all super nice to me and would talk to me on the phone and would want to hang out with me and invite me to do things that they were doing and stuff like that. But by that time, I was cool with the guys too. But there would be guys that thought I was either after their girlfriends or after the girls that they liked. And so they would try to pick on me. And like before I started becoming physical with people, because there was a point where I snapped in that way and I was getting physical with everybody when I was younger. I got in a lot of physical negotiations when I was younger, in that junior high time, because I had gotten tired of people trying to push me around and be mean to me when I didn't have the intention that they thought that I had. And, I had done a fair amount of just learning how to come back, like as far as verbally come back and stuff like that. But then people would get mad at you because you would humiliate them. And when you're in those young years and you're a boy like that, it will lead to actual fights and stuff like that. And so, so I really learned how to verbally defend myself probably before I learned how to do anything else. And then again, like I said, once I started hanging out with the trans girls, that's where I really just sharpened it. And then there was a point where, things were, well, there's been several points in my life where, it's been pretty, which I know sounds childish or whatever, but it's just the reality, where I've been really popular in the circles that I'm around or where I choose to hang out. And so I'm not going to lie and say that there weren't points when I would other people, like I talked about that last year, like or last episode, when I was hanging out with other kids when I was young and, on the popular side, hanging out with all the people you're supposed to be hanging out with. And we would other people and we would make people. And I didn't know any better because this was when I was young, I mean, like, so. I just followed their lead because I wanted to fit in like everybody else. I haven't always been the individual that I am now. There's times that I think back to when I was younger and trying to fit in, and I would be mean to people that I otherwise would have been nice to, just because I knew that if I threw them under the bus, that would make me look better. And like I said, that was when I was younger. I don't do that now. I haven't done that for years and years and years. And I do mean like years and years and years. Like that has not been my thing, because I quickly learned how much that doesn't feel good. Like that is truly, like, that's one of the only things that I really would be ashamed of myself if I were doing. If I were out there like trying to mistreat the weak, or weak sounds, but you know what I'm saying, like the people that are already in a tough position, or are already frowned on by society in a real way, because a lot of what the people that will come after me are, they everything to do with them is self-inflicted. And that's why I say, no matter who you are, under most circumstances, you are the problem, and I am my own problem, and I'm working on that, and I'm fixing it, and I'm liking getting to do that while I'm completely alone and not have anybody monitor it or supervise it or get in the way of it. Stay unbothered.